record. What I do with it afterwards, I don't know. So, welcome everybody. As Lucy said, my name is Katherine. I work for the Catholic Diocese of Arundel and Brighton as the Marriage and Family Life Advisor. And I really wanted to jump in when Sarah was talking, because in her list of people that she'd discussed grandparenting for faith with, she hadn't touched the Catholics. And we have the secret weapon, which is Pope Francis. So I'm just going to read you something that he said. He carries in his breviary, his prayer book, a note from his grandmother Rosa. And it says, "May my grandchildren, to whom I have given the best of my heart, have a long and happy life. But if there are days of pain or illness, or if the loss of a loved one fills them with despair, may they remember that a whisper of a prayer and a look at Mary at the foot of the cross can be like a drop of balsam, even to the deepest and most painful wounds." And he particularly sees the value of grandparents as being that stable, loving ministry to family life. So my title, A Gift, Grandparents, the Greatest Gift, really was because I wanted to explore the fact that the gift we have with grandparents is, yes, to our families, but it is also to each other. As peers, grandparents can support each other in the difficulties that they might have in navigating everyday life, but also navigating family life. I sort of liken it to being like a mums and toddlers group. You know, when you very first have a baby and you don't know what you're doing and you're feeling very anxious, grandparenting groups can provide that level of support to each other. So we operate with that in mind. To give you a brief history of what we've done, I met a lady called Catherine Wiley, who runs an organisation called the Catholic Grandparents Association, which, if you haven't come across, is really worth Googling. They offer a lot of materials. They also offer conversational cafe moments, which anyone can join, where they explore different attitudes of what grandparenting can look like. So Catherine inspired me to actually look at grandparents and how we can maximise life for them in our families and for themselves. So about 10 years ago, I, with a dedicated couple, set up groups around the diocese. So within a church, we called together grandparents and invited them to meet regularly for a variety of reasons, which I'll explain. The principles of these meetings are threefold. One, that they should be, the grandparents, the aim for the grandparents was that they would pass on their faith. The second would be that they would try to keep prayer at the heart of family life. And the third aim was that they should support each other. So those three aims are key to every meeting. Now, we have about 10, 12 groups across the diocese, and each group is different because although they meet monthly, the focus for those monthly meetings changes depending on who leads the group. You get the initial sort of, oh, I can't run a group, it's too hard sort of thing. But actually, all they need to do is book a hall for 10 weeks of the year, because they don't meet in August and they don't meet in December. The key rule is no one apologizes for absence. Okay, there's no register, there's no where were you. If you can make it, you can make it. But your family come first, and often grandparents, being busy people, can't make those meetings. Those meetings, as I said, take different structures. They range from having a visiting speaker coming in to talk about something interesting, something that's happening in the parish, something that they've done, or an event that they're talking about, or a prayer focus. They range from doing that to doing a practical activity like a fish and chip supper, where people just get together and socialise together and build those bonds of friendship. They, as a group, sometimes get together to provide something for the church community. So there are grandparents groups who host welcoming nights for new parishioners. So it's hosted by the grandparents group, and they invite new parishioners, and they are the welcoming face of the church. Or they'll do something in Advent or Lent that is a prayer focus that's led by them as nominated people. One key thing I forgot to mention is that we have natural grandparents, but we also have honorary grandparents. Honorary grandparents are those within our church community who may or may not have grandchildren of their own, but provide that silver-haired wisdom of the process of years that enable them to be that person in church that looks across at that family where that child is struggling or that parent is struggling and smiles instead of frowning, that winks at that child to try and engage them, that perhaps goes up to them at the end of the service and says, "How lovely to meet you. Your child is so gorgeous." That honorary grandparenting, that nurturing of the community, which is really, really important and runs alongside that of the natural grandparent. Because in all reality, certainly in our situation, we don't have many extended families living within the same community. So we don't have a grandparent and a parent and the child within that same service going community. So there's a sense of how do we nurture that relationship within the community as well as outside the community. So that's the structure of our groups. Beyond that, we offer various things which soothe and restore people. So we have a pilgrimage every year. We're very blessed to have a special shrine within Arundel and Brighton to Our Lady, and we hold a pilgrimage for grandparents once a year, which is a wonderful event. The bishop comes, we have mass, we have tea, we have cake, we have all sorts of speakers and moments of prayer and moments of sharing, and it's a real positive affirmation of being together as grandparents. We have a study day. Every year we have something which is aimed at supporting grandparents. So we've had a parenting expert who's come and talked about how to support your grandchildren without upsetting your own children. That was brilliant, because often you might want to say something to your grandchildren that you think is perfectly okay and exactly as you'd want to say it, but actually your own children could get very offended by that. They are their children. So we had a wonderful woman helping us navigate how we manage that, how you become grandparents without annoying your children. She also did another session with us on how to build children's self-esteem in the world that we live in, where children are very anxious and growing up with a lot of outside influences, how to positively build their self-esteem in a way that helps them navigate this modern world that we live in. We've had events looking at grandparenting through the Bible and how we can be inspired. We've had events on how to live our lives in a way that can be inspiring for children. A significant part of grandparenting is, yes, our explicit faith, but also our implicit faith. It's recognizing the way that we react to a charity appeal on TV. We react to a piece of news that's perhaps very distressing. What's our reaction as Christians that we're modeling behavior for our children? Sometimes being a Christian grandparent doesn't require us to mention our Christianity at all. It's the modeling of behavior. And that's really important. So we've had sessions on how do we do that and how do we raise the profile of that. So we're doing that. And when a child says, well, why did you? Because that's how I believe what I believe is the right way to live, because that's what Jesus taught us. So it's trickling down, that permeation of faith without necessarily always being explicit. And the last event that we're doing, which is an event we tried last year, which was a big celebration of being a grandparent. It was fantastic. It was in the cathedral, bishop, blah, blah, blah. And it was good. But next year, we're going to do families, bring your grandparents to celebrate them. So it's a slightly different twist. So it's a sort of celebrationary Thanksgiving for them. So that's the sort of scope of the things that we do. I wanted to make sure that you guys had a chance to interact and ask anything about what we do in order that might be helpful. So I'm just going to pause now and ask if there's anyone who wants to follow a slightly different direction to what I'm talking about, or you want to hear more about the establishment of groups. So if anyone wants to demute and shout, that'd be great.
Could you just say again what the 3 aims of the group were?
Yep. So the 3 aims of the group are to pass on the faith, to keep prayer at the heart of our family life, and to support each other. Okay, Julie.
Thank you, Catherine. I sat down this morning not knowing what I would take from this morning, squeezing it into a really busy time. and you know, it's quite amazing how moved and inspired I am by what I've heard already. So thank you. A couple of things. I would really appreciate being able to read and have a copy of the prayer that you mentioned the Pope carries, because I found that really powerful.
It is. The easy answer to that, Julie, is if you Google Pope Francis prayer for grandmother, it comes up.
Okay, thank you. I'll do that. The other thing, very briefly, is that in my day work, I work a lot with people who are trying to understand the mission of the church and deliver God's commission to people. And I'm around all the time with people who talk about the importance of growing a younger church. And it really grieves me when I hear that all of the time, because I feel that if you intentionally focus on that, and the way that traditionally in certainly the Anglican faith, that's viewed as a job for young people. Let's get more youth ministers, more school workers, everyone else. And it misses out the key people in children's lives who actually can have that continuity from birth right the way through their journey. And you know, the people that I meet who have an ongoing faith, when you understand how they got there, will often testify to that, as you described it, silver-haired person who led a local church group, who actually gave them more than just a Bible study, actually gave them a relationship of trust. So I'm really inspired. So I just wanted to share that and say thank you.
Julie, in answer to that, there was some research done last year by a lady called Susan Longhurst, into what brings people into church. We all do lots of research on why people leave the church, and she did some on why people come to church. And one of the most amazing things she found was that if people have a moment where they feel drawn to the church, the second moment, the one that resonates with them, is what their experience of their grandparents was.
Oh, really?
So there's evidential proof that what you're doing, you may not see in your lifetime, but you are laying groundwork for what sits with your grandchildren that may be really fundamental when they come to Christ later in life. And that, again, is not that, you know, come here, kneel down, say your prayers. It's this is what I believe. This is what is running through me like a stick of rock. This is what are the principles by which I live. That's what impacts on those grandchildren. So it's really, don't lose confidence. You need to know that it's important. So Charlotte, your hand is up.
I was just wondering, by the way, thank you very much for everything you've shared. I was wondering whether you've done anything around capacity. So one of the things that some of the aging population of our churches talk about is the changing capacity with age, and at the same time talk about an increased capacity in other areas. So they talk about not worrying so much about what they look like they did in earlier life, having a clearer sense of what they do want to say and what's really important. Sometimes even finding their voice in things, and having a deep desire and a longing actually for a rather lost younger generation. And I'm wondering, we've talked, Sarah Holmes talked about obstacles, which was really helpful. And I think sometimes when we name obstacles like I'm not as physically active,
Yeah.
I can't do things like the crazy youth leader.
Yeah.
I can't do that. But I'm just wondering whether, that there's a psalm that talks about how we have fruit into old age.
Yeah.
And what if this is vintage fruit? What if this is the very moment that God is waiting for? And we need to be talking about what we do with that fruit in the final years of our lives. So it doesn't
Absolutely.
just fall below the tree and just sort of get trampled on. It's used in a very proactive, focused way that is actually very appropriate for this time of life.
I think that's really I think that's a really good point, and I think that is one of the big benefits of creating these little groups in parishes, is that within that group, those people support each other, so they're very aware if one of that group is starting to lose capacity in a certain way, or physical or mental capacity, there's a support network in that group, in that parish for those people. But also it's the empowerment of people who hear from each other. So I'm going to tell you a story about a lovely lady who came to a grandparents group, and she came and went round the group. And as always happens when you start a grandparents group, you go around and you ask people to introduce themselves. And within the first 2 people, you get to, I'm Jane, I've got 4 children and 6 grandchildren, and none of them are baptized, and tears. That's always happens. And as they go around the group, they find other people who are the same. So there's a support in understanding that pain of your own children not passing on that faith to their grandchildren. Anyway, this lovely lady came and she said, I really struggle because my daughter knows how much my faith means to me, and she has forbidden me to mention my faith, to witness to anything I do in faith, to remove any articles of faith that I have around the house, any images when my grandchild comes. She's forbidden all of it. And the pain that this woman experienced was really difficult because her faith was what rooted her. She shared that in the group, and every month that group prayed together for all the intentions, particularly this lady's. By the end of the year, the woman's daughter had said, you can pray with your granddaughter. Prayer is really powerful, and shared prayer is really powerful. That sense of sharing your pain, praying together for something that really happens. There are amazing things that happen through that. So is your hand still up, Charlotte, or are you done? You're done, okay. I'm just looking for other experiences of groups where amazing things have happened. So our very first group that we ever set up, this lovely lady, she must have been about 89, and she came in out of breath, and she sat down and she said, I'm so sorry I'm late. And we said, no problem. She said, but I had to get 2 buses to get here. And we said, okay, it's not a problem. And she said, I've been in this parish for 15 years, but I've never felt able to go to anything before. But because I'm a grandparent, I can come to this. And it brought a real lump to my throat because, firstly, how awful are we as parishes that people feel they can't come unless they have a label that includes them. But this woman came and she shared her stories of what her life was like with her grandchild and how wonderful she was as being a grandparent. And then someone gave her a lift home and she met someone and she became part of the community in a truly holistic way because she'd stepped into that grandparenting role. So you don't know the benefits of these groups and what they can do and how they will improve, but they are significant. Any other questions, any other thoughts anyone wants to ask? Because I could ramble on forever. Okay, I'll keep rambling. So the groups themselves are easy to run. And I think one of the things that we need to make sure people understand is that we're not asking them to do an onerous task. We're not asking them to, as somebody said, get our Lycra on and do something that's really exciting and energetic and all the rest of it. We're asking people to gather as friends. To book a church hall is not difficult. To put tea and coffee on, to have those 3 areas of focus means you start with a prayer, you have a discussion, and to be honest, the discussion often comes from the group themselves. So your first meeting, if you invite everyone to give a little bit of a conversation about themselves and their family life, that's going to take you an hour and a half, even if you've only got 6 people in the group, because everyone wants to share their story of their family life. From the group itself will come the desire for what people want to do, want to talk about. We've got one group who are very theologically sound, so they discuss documents that come out from the Vatican, intellectually stretching, what is the church teaching about X, Y, or Z? This is what's important. We've got one group who like having lunch, so they get a minibus and they meet and they go off in the minibus to a different place and have lunch. But still within that, there are these focus aims, and they always include a prayer. Now, the lady I mentioned initially, Catherine Wiley, is a very persistent woman, and she went to the Vatican for years and knocked on the door. There's a dicastery for family faith, so an agency for family faith, and she knocked on that door and said, I'd like Pope Benedict, this was that long ago, to write a prayer for grandparents. Yes, off you go. Knock, knock. I'd like Pope Benedict to write a prayer for grandparents. And eventually he did. And it's a very long prayer and quite wordy, but it's very heartfelt. So we have a prayer that is, if you like, the Catholic prayer for grandparents, again, available online, Pope Benedict's prayer for grandparents. So every group meeting we have has that as part of its focus. Each group sometimes writes their own prayer that they want to say, that they want to do for themselves. So again, that can be something that you do in your group. I'm running out of thoughts. What would you like to know? It's easier for me to answer your questions.
I'm wondering about the honorary grandparents and kind of how it works integrating those into the group. Because if you've got lots of people coming who've got shared identity around being a grandparent, do you actually get other people coming in and being included in that community?
Thank you. Yes, I can understand the difficulty. If you're a grandparent talking about witnessing your own natural flesh and blood in your arms, that's very difficult if you're not a grandparent. But I think if you are an honorary grandparent with an intention of the love of faith that you want to pass on, generally those people are people who have a sense of what community is and what family is, extended church family, if you like. And so they can be drawn in. And I think you just need to be aware that if you're talking natural family, there is a slight difficulty. But I think it's important to include them because we exist because we're part of a community, a church community. We're not just a random grandparents group that's set up in a secular world. We have a core mission. And whether you are a natural grandparent or an honorary grandparent, I think you have that as your core belief. And there's enough of a tolerance and understanding of the fact that we have this love of Jesus that permeates everything we do, that enables people to feel that they belong. Clive, Rosemary, you've raised a hand.
Yeah, hello, good morning.
Hi.
I just want to come in from a slightly different angle. So we have 4 lovely grandchildren.
Lovely.
And one of the things that certainly we've noticed in a generational change is when we grew up, grandparents were people you went to visit at a weekend. But we are now in a generation, and a lot of our friends who are also grandparents, where we have our grandchildren come once a week because parents go back to work. And so it's just interesting. And this is kind of a shift in a generation, because a lot of mums, particularly mums, want to go back to even our own children. When our own children grew up, we made the decision that Rosemary would stay at home. She'd be a stay-at-home mum. Yeah. But that isn't the norm really generally now. And so for us, grandparenting is, we have the joy of grandparenting, but we're also full on in nappies, potties, high chairs, cots, all the sort of stuff that goes with having children, little ones, for a whole day, which is lovely. And then we kind of collapse at the end of the evening, exhausted. And so it'd be just, lovely to, and what is the experience of other people? I'm sure there are other people here that is what is happening now in, generally, and the support and understanding that, so it's a shift really in how society has changed.
I completely understand that. There, grandparents are taking on a very practical role. And I think the word exhausting is one I hear a lot. I look back with shame on what I expected my mother to do when she was my age with my baby. And I'm thinking, how on earth did I expect her to be at my house for 7:15 in the morning? When I shot off to work, but bye. The expectation is that grandparents do step in and fulfill that role. And I think there are three things really that come out from that. One is, we can't make our children appreciate us, but I think we do need to let them know the effort we're making. Not because we want them to know, but I think it's good for them to know. I think it's really important for them to know that you are offering sacrificial love for them because you want them to have the life that they want to have. But I think it's really important that we recognize that, and that they recognize that. The second thing in that is that the opportunity it provides for you to be able to look at your grandchildren in a different way. I know when we're parents to our children, while we're parenting them, we're looking at them thinking, oh, I want you to do this, and I hope you succeed here, and I hope you manage this, and I hope you manage that. And one of our grandparents explains that how you spell love when you're a grandparent is T-I-M-E. What you have as grandparents is what you didn't have as a parent, which is time. Time to invest in them without any aspirations for their future other than their happiness. And I think that comes with a real benefit of being able to see what life is. You're not going to worry that they're going to have, a high-flying job or do X, Y, and Z. You want them to be happy. And that's your goal. So that's a really important second part. And the third part is, I think, when you look at what you did with your own children in terms of faith, there's an opportunity to really reflect on that and think, how did I share my faith? Was I too implicit? Was I too explicit? Did I work in a way that enabled my own child to truly understand what relationship with Jesus looks like? Or was I more concerned about getting them to church and saying their prayers? So there's an opportunity there for that as a reflection too. So I think you're right, Clive. It's really hard, but I think it does offer different opportunities. And Becky's book, to be fair, there's loads of stuff in there about implicit grandparenting and how we can make the most of those opportunities and times that come up.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Is
That's
that helpful?
really helpful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Charlotte.
So I don't want to take the conversation, but I was just wondering, I think about my mum, who was never ever taught to share faith in the home.
Yeah.
You went to church, you sat there was no conversation between you and the church leader. you went home and you carried it out as a kind of implicit duty kind of thing. How, in the same way that we're now grandparenting in a different way, I think, how do you think those conversations are bubbling up when people haven't always learned how to talk about their faith and share their faith and realize that they are key disciples and disciplers?
Yeah, I think certainly in each aspect of the Christian strands of faith have different skills and talents. And one of the things that I am very aware of in our Catholic faith is the lack of concrete knowledge of the next generation down. There was an implicit sort of, God loves you. That's all you need to know. God loves you. He loves you. What else is there? And so what have they got to be able to share with that next generation? They're very thin on the ground. And there's, I think, as grandparents, we can be slightly more explicit, telling stories, walking past the church and saying, you know, that's God's house. Where do you think God lives? Why does God have a house? Drawing conversations about God in an explicit way, enabling you, if your own children allow you to do that, mind, but enabling you to have those conversations with your grandchildren. Meeting things that happen in daily life, again, are moments where you can be explicit, reading stories from the Bible, or stories about moral stories that enable you to raise questions or conversation with your grandchildren, so that you can be more explicit and feed in information that might inspire them, that might encourage them, those sorts of things. So I absolutely agree, Charlotte, there is a real need to teach, but it's how you do it, because grandchildren are not going to come to you for school. You know, they're not coming to you for lessons. So if it emanates from you as part of your life, you know, we're not going to leave the tap running while we're cleaning our teeth, because we're wasting this wonderful planet that God made for us. Yes, he did. He made this planet and we need to look after it. How can we look after our planet? What can we do to help God keep this place a wonderful place? Let's not drop our crisp packet on the floor, because that's rubbish. Let's think about the way, it's about taking moments which might seem tiny and instilling your understanding of faith as they come out from that. Oh, we've got 1 more minute. Julie, did you want to quickly say something? Oh, you're muted, Julie.
Yeah, sorry, just to quickly confirm what you just said, I was about to say, because it's about, this is how I live and this is who I am, you know, that curiosity that comes.
Yeah.
But as a non-church child, in this position as grandparent, I've become a helper at the Sunday school.
Yeah.
For a couple of reasons, but one of those reasons is I can learn how to talk to children about faith in a way that no one taught me.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for listening. I'm sorry if it wasn't what you wanted. I hope it answered some questions, and you can Google me and send me a message if ever you wanted to. I'm on the Arundel and Brighton website and I'm very happy to help. Lovely to meet you all.
Great. I think we're getting back up to full numbers, which means everyone's back. So thank you for coming back into the main room, and I hope you enjoyed your first seminar. We are going to be opening another seminar slot in a few minutes' time. So you get to hear another speaker. So be thinking about who you would like to hear, but I will be sending recordings around after the event as well. So you can listen to all 4 if you're real keen bean. But for now, I wanted to hand over to my colleague, Marion, from Anna Chaplaincy, who's going to tell you a little bit about what they're up to. Marion, are you around?
I am here. Thank you, Lucy. Thanks. And well, what a delight it is to be able to join the webinar this morning and be able to celebrate with you the launch of Grandparenting for Faith. I'm a granny to 3 little ones myself, and well, I've been reading this book and I've just found it so helpful, so practical, and I can see myself using a lot of those ideas. churches are families, aren't they? Multi-generational families, and BRF Ministries really embodies that through having ministries equipping young, old, and everybody in between. I work as a coordinator for Anna Chaplaincy Ministry, which trains and equips people to come alongside older folk who may have a strong faith, little faith, no faith at all, to offer spiritual care. And we've now got over 350 Anna chaplains nationwide, who are all appointed and managed by local churches. And they offer this outward facing ministry, which might range from visiting individual people in their own homes, leading services in care homes, enabling weekday groups locally, running holidays at home, supporting care staff and carers, whatever the need is locally, really. And many older people have much wisdom and insight to impart. And I love the way in the book, Becky quotes from Psalm 78, we will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds.
Maybe a second round of drugs.
And I so much valued knowing that my granny prayed for me. And I think this book is such a great encouragement for grandparents and great grandparents, I may say, to have the confidence to share their faith with the younger generation. And I'm sure that this book is one that Anna chaplains will be able to recommend to those they have contact with. I've not told you a lot about Anna chaplaincy itself, but please do visit the BRF Ministries website and get in touch with us if you'd like to find out more. We'd love to be able to share with you how that could work, both perhaps for you as an individual and in your church. So there we are. That's a very swift rundown, and I will be passing back now to Lucy and the team, introducing our next seminars. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you so much, Marianne. That's great. Sorry, we've just had a quick little technical issue. So I'm just recreating our groups. We're nearly there. And you can be thinking who you want to go and listen to for the next round of seminars. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to open the rooms. I'm going to give us all 30 minutes this time because we were so super good at getting into our rooms first time. Please go ahead and pick a room, pick a seminar, and if you can't get in there or you can't see the seminars or anything like that, just say in the chat and we'd love to help you get to the seminar room you'd like to get to for seminar slot number 2.
Hello and welcome everybody. To report. So grandparents have that as a gift, and each of those areas has a role and an importance. When to give you a brief overview of what I do in my role as the Marriage and Family Life Advisor, so taking it aside from the grandparenting bit itself, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we did in our diocese to establish a network of grandparent groups. I heard a lady called Katherine Wiley speak. She runs an organisation called the Catholic Grandparents Association, which is really worth Googling. They offer lots of talks and information about how to run parish groups, but also an online forum where you can have discussion with different people and they have interesting speakers. So she's very powerful, very influential. And one of the things she was saying was that we need to recognise the need for grandparents in our communities. That's really reflected in the very first group we went to, very first group I established, where this lovely lady arrived out of breath and exhausted because she'd come on the bus, 2 buses to get there. And she said, I've been in this parish for 12 years and I've never felt I could join anything before, but I'm a grandparent, so I can come to this. Which was awful.
Something about
to think that all this time she had belonged to the parish but hadn't felt valued or needed. So she participated in the group, someone took her home. Immediately she was drawn into parish life and enabled to feel that she belonged. So we decided that we would set up groups of grandparents and honorary grandparents, because not many grandparents live in the same practical community as their own families. So we wanted to build a group which was focusing on developing the sense of grandparenting in that community, as well as for their own home community. So we set up groups across the diocese, aided by a very nice couple who happen to be sitting in this group and shouldn't be, because they've heard all this before. So that's Mike and Christine. I'm just going to point them out sitting there. So they helped me by navigating the practicalities of running these groups. So the groups meet monthly. They have one rule, which is that you never apologise for not going. Grandparents are busy people, and if you can't make a group, it doesn't matter. They have 3 particular aims for each of these group meetings. One, that they think about passing on the faith to their grandchildren. 2, that they attempt to keep prayer at the heart of family life. And 3, that they support each other. Grandparents groups exist in a way that mother and toddler groups did when you first had a baby. That sense of sharing, the confusion, the misunderstandings, the how do I do it, what's your experience of, those sorts of things, grandparents groups exist to support that. Whenever we start a group, the first session involves going around and introducing each other. And before we get to the third person, there will always be someone who says, hello, my name is Jane. I have 6 grandchildren and none of them are baptized. And tears. Immediately, there's a look of a shared experience around the group, with the pain of recognizing that faith that you so wanted to pass on to your own children has not been passed on to their children through the gift of baptism. So there's a shared understanding of where people are coming from, that everybody has difficulties with that. Now, these groups, each of them take on their own different style, depending on who's running them. So we have a group who go out for lunch. They meet monthly. They have prayer intercessions for their grandchildren. They say the grandparents' prayer and they go out for lunch. We have another group who look at theological stuff that's coming out from the Vatican. So they look at new documents, or they look at research, or they look at interesting things that have been produced in line of church teaching, and they discuss those. We have another group who are a fellowship group who meet and really just have developed a friendship. They've now become an amorphous group who work within the parish to support the parish. So they hold new parishioner evenings. They focus on those. They invite, they welcome. They're there as a group. They hold prayer meetings for the rest of the parish within Advent or Lent. They support families whose children are preparing for sacramental moments like communion or confirmation. They work with those parents and support those. So they've become an identified group who then can impact and support the parish community. They do involve the honorary grandparents. That role is so important. For whatever reason, you can either be an honorary grandparent in that you are a natural grandparent, but you're not to your children within your community, but you have that natural grandparenting. Or you could be someone who doesn't have grandchildren of their own, but who has that vested interest of making families feel welcome. So you talk about the fact that noisy children in church, how do we look at those parents? Do we look at them and wink at that child? Do we look at them and give them a smile? Or do we inadvertently glare at them because they're being really noisy? And how do we help those glarers? How do we help those glarers remember what it was like to struggle with 3 small children in a church community, sitting still, listening, behaving? I often say my favourite prayer came at the end of Mass, where the priest would say, the Mass is ended, go in peace. And I'd say, thanks be to God, which meant I'd got through without killing somebody. So how do we as grandparents or honorary grandparents support families in those church moments to make those families feel that their children are welcome, they are appreciated, and they are supported? And it might be that we go to the back of the church and get a book and give it to that child.
We've done that for years as Anglicans.
Sorry, someone was someone. Please feel free to chip in. Someone said something about being Anglicans. Unmute if you wanted to offer that. Okay, we'll move on. Those are the things that happen monthly, apart from August and December, where we don't meet. There are other ways that we support the networks of grandparents that we have in the diocese. We have an annual day, a pilgrimage day, where all the grandparents are invited to a particular Mass in a shrine we have in the diocese, a particularly beautiful church. And we have a service, and we have a speaker, and we have tea and cake, and lots of tea and cake, and opportunities for different forms of prayer and a focus on grandchildren. So that's one. Another one is we have formation days, where we invite speakers to come and give some formation to grandparents about ways that they can support their families. And that takes a range of different styles. So we've had someone talking about grandparents in the Bible and the importance of grandparents. So that's affirming how, through church history, that extended family, that domestic church has really been important. We've had a child psychologist come and talk about how to support your grandchildren without upsetting your own children, how to navigate that difficult passage of, they're not my children, but they're my grandchildren. How do I not upset my own children in the way that I support them? We've had someone come and talk about how to help your grandchildren in this world where there is so much anxiety for young people, and looking at self-esteem and how to help young people grow in their own understanding of themselves as human, and how to help them flourish in a normal, wholesome way. Young people today, we all know, are faced with so many challenges that we didn't have growing up. The media, the social media, all of that sort of thing. So we've had somebody look at that. We've had a really interesting piece of research delivered, which was really inspiring, by a lady called Susan Longhurst, who was doing a PhD on why people come back to church. We all look at why people leave church, and we can be miserable about the number of people that leave our faith. But she did what pulls people back into church. And what she looked at was what supports people once they've had that first trigger of actually church might be, faith might be, Jesus might be interesting, God might be. What is it that helps resonate? And amazingly, she found out it was grandparents. That for those people who've been pulled, had a moment of looking at God speaking to them, what resonates with them is what their grandparents did. And that's really important. So it says to us, we might not know what happens to our grandchildren in our own lives, but what you do is important. What you do explicitly and implicitly is really important, because it's laying down foundations that will serve your children, your grandchildren, for the rest of their lives. So we talk about how you can support your grandchildren in an explicit way, how you can share your faith with them if you're allowed to. If your own children are happy for you to talk about faith, to talk about God, to talk about your beliefs, for you to take your grandchildren into a church, to light a candle, to talk about what is the church, what is this building, why is that important, to share a scripture with your grandchildren, to talk about your favourite stories and who Jesus was. That's brilliant explicitly. For many of our grandparents, they're not allowed to do that. Their own children have lost the faith or are disillusioned with the faith and do not want their own parents sharing their explicit faith with their children. But that doesn't mean you can't share your faith, because it's what you do implicitly about how you live your life that's sharing your faith. And Becky's book is great for that. You can't really see it. Becky's book. It's great about talking about ways that you can share your faith implicitly, helping your children understand that there is a stick of rock through you that says, I have a relationship with God, that directs your behavior and your life. And that's what roots you. So when you're talking to your grandchildren about, for example, why you care for the environment, have an implicit desire to protect the world that God has given us, or talking to your grandchildren about your moral compass, to be able to explain that is set within the teachings of your church, your faith rather, is sharing your faith with your grandchildren. The last event we do is going to be a slightly different one this year. So last year we had an event in the cathedral led by the bishop, affirming grandparents. Just everyone came. The bishop told us all we were wonderful. I'm not a grandparent yet, but you were wonderful. You're doing a great job. Brilliant. And I had this moment of inspiration actually, and it was because one person said, I've got to bring my mother. She can't come on her own. And I thought, actually, yeah, you should be bringing your mother. You should be bringing your parents, the grandparents, to say, hey, look, these are our grandparents and we love them and we celebrate them. So that's our focus for this year, is celebrating our grandparents. So inviting people to bring their grandparents because they think they're great, to sort of raise them up and give them affirmation. What else was I going to talk to you about? The groups themselves have had many, many positive moments. The fact that people pray together can't be undervalued. At the end of each session or the beginning of each session, there are always intercessory prayers, and our prayers are heard. We must never forget that our prayers are heard. So we had a group where we had a lady who was very distressed because her daughter would not let her mention God, say anything, would not have any religious artifacts around when the grandchildren came, wouldn't allow her to take her to church, wouldn't allow her to do any of that. And this particular group prayed with this lady for a year. And after about 18 months, she came back and said she was now able, her daughter had given her permission to talk about faith with her grandchildren. So I don't think we mustn't forget that our prayers are heard, and that God appreciates what we're doing. I'm going to stop there and just see if anybody would like to ask a question or reframe what we're talking about in any way. We had lots of questions in the last group, so rather than waiting to the end and running out of time, is there anything anybody would like to know? Please just either speak or put your hand up. Yep, Colin.
Sorry, it's Caroline. I think
my son
was the last one to use this computer, so he put his name on it. But my name is Caroline.
Hello,
Anyway,
Caroline.
it's my impression that in churches, it's the grandparents who are doing most of the work. A lot of churches, they couldn't run without their grandparents running the creche or teaching in Sunday school or serving the coffee. I'm sure it's always grandparents or even great grandparents who are doing that job. So, you know, they aren't an invisible part of church life, are they?
No, absolutely not. Grandparents are really, really important. But what we need to do, or what you as grandparents need to do, is work out how to drag that next generation in, because we're finite. We know we're finite. We're hoping we're eventually going to go to our heavenly home. And we need to make sure that we're laying enough groundwork of how our communities, our faith and our communities are important. So dragging people into helping you. I can remember, I'm not a grandparent, but I can remember when my children were little getting dragged into the church cleaning.
Yes.
And my little girls polishing the seats and then rubbing the polish with their bottoms so that there were these shiny spots. But it's those sorts of things, taking your grandchildren to help do that sort of thing, you know.
Yes.
And you've said, I worry that it could distress grandparents who will never be grandparents through baby loss. Yes, I appreciate that. We have a wonderful pair of honorary grandparents in our parish who were never able to have children. And when we talk about grandparents, I worry about them. But when I see them interacting with the children in the parish, I know that they have been able to share that love that they would have had for their own natural children with those children, because there is a different view of family. It doesn't make up for it. Of course it doesn't. Nothing can make up for that. Nothing can make up for not being a grandparent if that's your heart's desire. But if we remember that we are God's family and that this community that we belong to is a family, we can affirm those people for the gifts that they bring, because they really do bring gifts. It's not a sort of nominal pat on the head. They bring wisdom, they bring love, they bring time, they bring an energy that perhaps natural grandparents don't have because they're knackered, because they're busy being grandparents all the time.
Yeah. Yes, Catherine, that would be me. Having had a few years of we'll call it troubles. I have become a grandparent to two of my children, have a baby each. But the difference in joining the club and not being in the club, you know, not being in the club could mean that you're a little bit emotional because you're going through this journey with your children.
Absolutely.
And then you're in the club, which is the wonderful, exciting, and you're full of it. But seeing that you have come through that journey of not being in the club, I don't know. It's just you know, whatever. Anyway, that's.
I think
just
I think that's very, very wise, and I think having people in that, you know, that's a shared experience. My son is marrying this year. They are longing for children. I am longing for children, for grandchildren. There is a fear in my mind that this won't be easy, because people assume it is. And when they get married at 34, it's not as easy as when you're 20. To have someone walk along that journey with me would be really helpful. So I think we all bring something different.
Yes.
It's recognizing where we are and not saying, this is what grandparenting looks like, you must do it this way, this is what's important. I think it's about, like in everything we do in church, making everybody recognize they all bring their different gifts and talents, and that those things are valued.
Thanks, Catherine.
You're welcome. Mike, Christine, come on. Is there anything you'd like to say as my support right hand support in the diocese? Is there anything you'd like to say? So Mike and Christine run a group in the parish of Horsham, but they also manage all the other groups for me, in that they support those groups with constant affirmation and messaging. So anything you guys would like to add?
Gosh, I suppose one thing that's just gone through my mind, one of our overriding thoughts is that we say, how do grandparents spell time and love? How do grandparents spell love? And we say T-I-M-E.
Yeah.
And this is something that we do have. And recently we had Catherine Wiley, her Faith Cafe. It was led by somebody called Keith Chappell from the University of Birmingham, and it was about mediation. And for us, he focused on the idea of us being mediators in the family, not in a big sort of way, but just, being there. And he taught us really, the whole thing was to listen. And this was compassion. Empathy, compassion, but we do have the time to be there to listen and to help the child, not to come in rushing in with advice or ideas, but to give the child the time. Look, you're listening and helping them in that way to come up with their own ideas. So that one example was the child was being bullied, and the grandmother desperate to get on the phone, ring the school. And by just listening, the child came up with the idea that she would speak to another friend who could act as a bit of a mediator. So anyway, I mustn't gabble on, but
No,
really
that's really helpful. I think one of the things that's really important is that grandparents don't have the same vested interest in the grandchildren. As a parent, you want this, you want that, you want them to be successful, you want them to get married, you want and all I hear from my grandparents is they want their grandchildren to be happy, and to know they're loved by God. And that's a really different attitude. So to know that that's your focus means that you can love unconditionally. And that's really important, to love your grandchildren completely, unconditionally for who they are. They might not know that they're a child of God, but you know they are. So it's helping them do that. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you back in the main room.
Thank you. Hello, David.
The seminar you were in. Welcome back. If you're coming back from seminars, we're just waiting for everybody to join us, and then we'll go into some Q&A. I don't know if it's snowing anywhere else in the country, but from where I sit, I have a great view of our garden, and it has been steadily snowing more and more this morning, and now it's actually starting to settle and get quite thick, which is very exciting.
Really jealous. We want some snow down here. There's nothing.
No snow in Wiltshire.
I'm very sorry. I shouldn't have said anything, should I? No. Anyway, it's great to have you all back. Thank you so much. And I hope those seminars are really useful to you, and will continue to be useful to you as you dwell on them over the next weeks and months. I'm sure they will be. We are going to go into a time of Q&A now. So I'd like to invite you, if you've got any questions for any of our speakers, to pop them in the chat. If you would like to direct your question at a particular speaker, you can type their name into the chat. If you would just like, if you don't mind who answers, then just type your question in and we'll direct it to somebody. But Becky and Catherine and Sarah and Rachel will be our panel. So we will be we'll be asking them questions on your behalf. So thank you so much in advance for the questions that you type in. And just while you're typing, I actually wanted to ask you a question. And the question is this: we're getting to the end of our morning together. You have paid £10 for the privilege of being here. And I want to ask you, do you feel this morning has been worth £10? And the reason I'm asking you this is, well, I think there are three answers to this question. I think either you're thinking, yeah, this event's been good. I've got £10 worth of value from this. That's great. If that's you, I would like to invite you to consider paying it forward, to consider giving BRF Ministries a £10 donation so that somebody in the future can benefit from these resources that we put out for people, because much of what we do, we offer free of charge. And the things that we charge for, we charge really the bare minimum so that everybody can be included. But some of you might feel called today to be able to pay it forward, and that would be great. Or secondly, you might be sitting there thinking, well, I've got loads more than £10 in this session. This session has been priceless. It's you know, I would have paid a lot more for this session. In which case, could you consider topping up your donation to BRF, again, to help us to continue doing what we do, to help us create resources, and to help us to support those who need it. The final answer I think you would give to that question is, what a waste of money. I wish I'd never parted with that £10. I wish I'd never come. What a waste of a morning, waste of £10. In which case, please email me. I will be emailing you at some point in the next 24 hours or so. So just hit reply to that, because we are always trying to get better at what we do. So if there are any ways in which we could have made this event better for you and improved it, we would love to know about them. I will read and reply to every email I get. So please don't hesitate to get in touch if that's you. But I also want to kind of follow that by saying that you are here because you love your grandchildren. And some of you may be concerned for the world that they're growing up in. It's an increasingly godless, well, it's always been a godless world, I suppose, in some senses, a godless society, a godless culture. And there are many, I'm so sorry. That's my phone going off. That will teach me not to put it on silent. There we go. There are so many confusing things about the world that our grandchildren are growing up in, so many difficult things about this society. And we know that as Christians, our grandchildren's only hope is Jesus, our society's only hope is Jesus. And yet we know so much that a lot of children and young people are hemorrhaging out of our churches. They're leaving in droves, and we want to try and change the culture. And we also know that loads more children are growing up in families where they're not knowing that safety and love and support of a church family. And many of those children have got fabulous Christian grandparents like yourself, but they might be in families where they're not able to access church, they're not able to get to know Jesus very easily for themselves. And we want to change that culture. And here at Parenting for Faith, that is what we are all about. We are changing that culture. We are gathering around parents, carers, the churches who support and encourage them, to help children to meet and know God, to help children develop a genuine relationship with God that lasts into adulthood and matures and lasts for their whole life. And it would be a total honour if you would consider partnering with us in this work. You can do that in two ways. You could pray for us. We would be so grateful for all your prayers. We cannot do this without prayer. And you can also give to us financially to help us do what we do. And I find this absolutely phenomenal, but you can actually partner with Parenting for Faith for as little as £2 a month. Now, even in York, where I live in the north of England, you cannot get even a coffee in a coffee shop for £2. And you might think, gosh, it's such a small amount. Does that really make a difference? But I can assure you it really does make a difference. £2 a month is such an encouragement to us. And it is a way of working together to gather around parents, gather around grandparents and families and churches, and to do something different with this generation of children and young people. So if you would like to look into becoming a friend of Parenting for Faith, or to give a one-off donation, this is the website to do it. I will email this out as well, so don't worry if you don't have a pen or paper handy. It just takes a few minutes to do or to set up, and we'd be so grateful. But now we are heading to some questions. So we've got loads of questions. If we can't get to all these questions right now, then we will find some way of answering them for you. And again, we'll send that out via email. So don't worry if we don't get to your question. I'm going to make sure there we go. I get to the questions and don't miss any. Okay. So we have a question here. What about surrogate grandparents in the church family? Katherine, would you like to answer this question? Because I know you were talking about this.
Hi, yeah, we in our grandparent groups which exist in our parishes, we're very keen to enable all sorts of grandparents, natural grandparents and honorary grandparents, to feel part of that community. Sometimes that's honorary grandparents because their grandchildren are not in any way local, so they are you know, honorary, but also grandparents who, adults who have perhaps never had children or who've never had grandchildren. I think I'm an honorary grandparent because I don't have grandchildren yet. My children aren't married or established, but I behave as a grandparent in my community. And by that, I mean that I am, I endeavour to really make families feel welcome and think about ways that maybe I can enable those children to feel more comfortable in the church environment. And that might be as simple as going to the back of the church and getting a book, giving that book to a child who's bored, whose parents struggling, or offering to take a baby or put someone on my knee, and modelling a behaviour of welcome and friendship. And that goes, it sits within those lines of, you know, health and safety and GDPR and don't touch, but actually I am exhibiting the behaviour of someone who loves in a Christ-like manner. And I think that's really important. So we're very keen on enabling people to feel part of those groups.
Thank you, Catherine. That's great. It would be great to hear from all panelists on all these questions, but it looks like we've got about 30 questions, so that's not going to be possible. But thank you, Catherine. That's really helpful. Great question here from Roger. Families can be complicated. Becky, I'm aiming this at you just so you've got a few seconds to prepare. Do you have any particular advice for single or divorced grandparents or step grandparents? I'm sure that relates to a lot of people on the call today. So, Becky, what advice would you give?
Yeah, the one thing that I discovered when I started talking to grandparents about grandparenting faith was how enormously variable families are and how many different situations. And this fact that you're one step removed from, you're not responsible for kind of all the big parenting decisions. So you may not be comfortable with things, or you may be have to take a step back or even be pushed back sometimes. I think there's a chapter in the book which tries to address some common situations together with advice we received from grandparents. I think one of the important things is that you endeavour to build up as stronger connection as you can with your family in those circumstances. And that isn't always under your control, but you know, I spoke to one grandma and she still sends the birthday cards and stuff like that, even though she doesn't even necessarily get a reply. But endeavour to build connection. Whether that's inviting your grandchildren to come over, popping a card in the post, giving them a call, always being available within reason and welcoming. I think one of the things we talked about, I don't know if you were in the seminar, was the fact that when we have a good connection with someone that's good for both of us, good things follow from that, trust is built. I think to remember that children are perceptive. You know, if you have a situation where you don't see one member of the family as much, so that child still knows that person exists and is curious about, we're curious about our family and what makes them tick. I think don't let faith become a barrier. And as people explain this to me, I found this really challenging. You know, your greatest desire may be for your grandchildren to meet and know God, something like that. But the stories I was hearing was saying you have to step back and don't let the faith bit of your life become the thing that stands between you and that family. The more important thing is that you have a relationship with them. So, you know, somebody said to me, don't mention when's the baby going to get baptized, even if you're desperate for that to happen. They would describe thinking about what happens if the family comes to visit on a Sunday. Do you go off to church as you always do and leave them sitting at home? Or do you just say, no, today's a day for the family? There are decisions that you need to make knowing your family. Things like that. And another thing that was suggested was to reflect on the barriers. What's caused the estrangement or the problem? Is there anything you can do, or maybe a conversation you can have that will help with that, and just open up those conversations. Are scary, aren't they? You know, families are complex, but to reflect and check in with God. Is there anything I need to do? And one of the things we talk about a lot of parenting faith is asking God for our next step. I think sometimes when we're faced with a huge problem, like I'm estranged from my family, or they've got divorced, or whatever it is, we want God to rush us through to the final solution. But actually,
all those solutions are made of little steps. We had a lovely story. We ran Grandparenting for Faith pilot groups, and Kate had a story from hers about a grandmother who was in despair about a situation with her grandchildren. And she asked God for one next step. And the next step was so simple. It was to invite this child on a car journey, and it transformed everything. So keep asking God for your next steps. Don't lose hope. The other thing I'd say, and I'm really inspired by Katherine in this, is get yourself a grandparenting gang. You know, you'd be surprised. Most people are facing similar things or experience similar things. You know, get people to hold your arms up like Aaron and her to say, I will stand with you in this season of praying for your grandchildren.
Thank you, Becky. Loads of good practical tips there for all of us, actually. That's great. Thank you. I can answer the next question because it's a very quick one with a very quick answer. Will there be a Grandparenting for Faith course? Well, never say never. It's always good to keep options open. There are no concrete plans for Grandparenting for Faith course at this moment. That doesn't mean that there won't be one in the future. That depends a lot on finances and staffing and prayer and all those kinds of things. So if you'd like to see a Grandparenting for Faith course, then please do partner with us to help make that happen, because that would be great. There's no concrete plans for this year.
But Lucy, can I just interrupt? At the back of the book, we were aware that we wouldn't be able to put a course in place quickly. So we've done a kind of an outline of a session you could use either on your own or with other people to cover all the chapters of the book, so you could work through it kind of on a DIY course.
And equally, I'm very happy, Lucy, to talk to anybody about how you might use setting up a network of grandparents groups to do a self-help course. The group, the dynamic, the strength of those groups is what really makes a difference. So I'd be very happy to talk to anyone who might want to know how to do that.
That's great. Thank you, Katherine. Katherine, I'm going to stick with you for this next question. How can we leave a legacy for our grandchildren? Big question. Try and keep your answer shortish.
Yeah, great question. I think we do. There's been research by a lady who works for the Sycamore. I don't know if you've come across Sycamore. It's a faith Zoom things. She's a PhD student. Why do people come back to church? Her research showed that when people have a moment where they experience Christ, they experience the love of God, what takes them the next step, what takes them the step further, is the memory of their grandparents. And that's evidenced. So that's really important to affirm us that what we're doing matters. We might not see it. We might not suddenly see this child filled with the love of God and singing praises, but you don't know what happens. God knows. God knows what's happening. We leave a legacy by being the person we are, by having the love of God running through us like a stick of rock, and being in our explicit and our implicit behaviour. Sometimes we can't be explicit. Our own children don't want us to be, but our implicit behaviour resonates with our grandchildren. So we do leave a legacy. I think you just need to be sure of that.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The next question is, do you know of any resources which are aimed at grandparenting children with special needs? Special needs children often see and read situations and conversations differently. Very relevant for a lot of us, more and more diagnoses coming out. I'm going to pop into the chat a link to the Parenting for Faith resources that we have on additional needs, because I think all of these could be relevant to anyone who's in the life of a child with additional needs. But does anybody on the panel, would anyone like to specifically answer this question? Has anyone come across specific resources aimed at grandparents on this?
I think I would just use the parenting resources myself and then adapt that to how I behave as a grandparent, recognizing that step outside. It's just that little step different. You're not the parent, but having an awareness enables you to understand it.
Yeah, thank you, Katherine.
I guess I would also say with additional needs is that the principles are the same. And one of the great strengths of a grandparent is that you know how that unique child is uniquely shaped. And so as you said, you know, they think differently and they perceive differently, but you know what they like and what they don't like and how their brains perceive. And so as you normally would adapt how you talk and how you point things out, the God stuff is the same. How you describe relationships with their friends and how you describe relationships with God. It's you have a lot of insight already into that grandchild. And so taking the principles of parenting for faith and how to talk about God is what you already have in your hand. And so to be bold to do that, because it's okay when you get it wrong. It's okay to say, I think differently now, or that didn't quite work, and try it a different way, because it's that perseverance over a long time that helps with children with additional needs.
Thank you, Rachel. The next question, again, such a relevant one for so many. My daughter and husband have no faith and are hostile to Christian faith. How do we help our granddaughter to start finding Jesus? We've got a few questions like this. And there's another aspect to the question, which is that they live overseas. So I'm going to separate those two questions out because different people have asked them in different ways. Let's try the hostility angle first. Would anyone particularly like to answer that question? What if my own children are hostile to my faith?
We've had experience of that in our grandparent groups. So firstly, there's support from the other grandparents in the group. Prayer, really powerful. God will sort it. We have to have faith. We're here because we have faith. You just keep on going. If they don't want you to specifically be explicit, don't do it, because you have to protect your relationship with your own children. But remember the power of prayer.
Thank you, Catherine. Becky, do you have some ideas as well? I know you've touched on this in your book, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we have grandparents in our church in that situation. It's absolutely heartbreaking, because it's the complication for them is that their life is so God-filled and church-filled and everything else. There is no separate life they can live, in a sense. You can't just cut God out of your day-to-day. So they do find it challenging, but I think it is to remember that your grandchildren are really interested in you as people and will notice what makes you tick. But there was one simply adorable, well, adorable is the wrong word, just really compelling idea I got from a grandparent, who had this situation where they weren't allowed to talk to their grandchild about faith at all. And she said, I keep a journal for each of my grandchildren. And she'd done so for years. And in there, she just wrote down all the things she'd like to tell them about God, or a time when she was praying and thought of them, or it was their sports day and it was lovely to hear how they'd done, and it was their birthday, and this was their hopes and dreams. And she said, one day I will be able to give this to my grandchild. And I just thought, she will. And I couldn't imagine the impact of reading of a grandparent's love and dreams for a child, even if they received that as an adult. And I just thought that was just wonderfully powerful if you were unable to do anything else, because those hopes and dreams and those prayers remain. So I just passed that one on as a bit of wisdom from somebody that felt positive in a really difficult situation. And it is also this thing of remembering that your faith primarily isn't shared by words, to be honest. When we were writing the book, we sent out a questionnaire to grandchildren of Christian grandparents saying what made a difference in your faith. And most of the time it was very ordinary little things like, oh, I noticed my grandmother kneeling in the pew. Now, grandma hadn't explained that at all, but 40 years later, this still had an impact on them. So just living your life as you do will speak volumes in itself. And also God is on the case as well. And that can feel very, very hard to retain in difficult circumstances, but he is.
Thank you, Becky. Gosh, I was tearing up there. What a lovely practical idea. Because your grandchildren are going to grow up and become adults and get to choose for themselves.
The other thing about that is to remember that actually your grandchildren may be 6 and 9 or whatever it is, but at some point they get autonomy. When they're 14, 15, 16, that they'll start asking their own questions. They just keep that relationship going, keep being those loving, available grandparents who love them, and that will just clear the way for a conversation to happen one point in the future.
And we're going to try and fit in 2 more questions, but I realise we won't answer them all, so I'm really sorry, but we will find some way of answering them in written form and get that to you by email. 2 more questions. The first is the second part of that question, which is how do we grandparent from a distance when we live a long way away, or even in a different country or continent, to our grandchildren? And then we're going to move on to I thought this was a really interesting question. Any tip where the other pair of grandparents have a different faith or a different approach, and how we kind of grandparent peacefully in that situation? So would anyone like to answer the question about distance?
I'm happy to. I mean, this is the one real positive of the modern era of phones. my children's grandmother will constantly drop them a text to say, happy feast day, or gosh, it's beautiful, or gosh, it's snowing today, isn't that wonderful? And it's the relationship. She doesn't talk about God all the time, but it's this drop, drop, drop relationship building. So I think communication with children as soon as they're old enough on a phone, or someone's already put it in the chat, you know, a card, for no other reason than something's beautiful and just struck you.
Thank you, Catherine. Yeah. And last question, Sarah, I'm aware we haven't heard from you. Don't feel any obligation to answer, but I'd love you to chime in on this if you'd like to. Any tips for when the other pair of grandparents have a different faith or a different approach? Feel free to say no, Sarah, by the way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sorry, I think my connection's very bad, but absolutely. I think it's all about talking, you know, don't assume, you know, and I think a lot of what we've just been talking about, these different questions, sometimes we assume just because things happen, that means we can never do anything or never say anything. And so I think that open dialogue and conversation, especially when there's other family members involved, is so key. But absolutely what everyone's been saying about, you know, modeling yourself, you know, and showing your faith through what you do, that is still absolutely valid and is always there, no matter what else is happening in the child's life.
Thank you so much. Great, thank you, everybody. There are some fantastic questions we haven't got to, so please rest assured that we will get to them and we will send you something in writing to approach these questions, because they are such good questions. Thank you for all your lovely feedback as well. Thank you so much for coming this morning. It's been wonderful to have you. You've been an absolutely brilliant group of people. Thank you so much to Becky, Catherine, Rachel and Sarah, our fantastic speakers. Do stay in touch. I'll send you an email so you know how to do that if you want to stay in touch with what we're doing here at Parenting for Faith, Anna Chaplaincy, or any of the other BRF ministries. But for now, take care and God bless, and have a brilliant rest of Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. See you, everyone. I feel like I should have some like closing music here, shouldn't we? We should have a theme tune.
We need a theme tune.
Church or something.
I'm not volunteering to sing one. I just thought. You, Rachel. Yeah, I could rely on you.
It was timed wrong, evidently. Sorry.
Hope everyone can see how to leave the room, but if you've got any
struggle.
trouble leaving the room, let me know. I can remove you, which sounds really harsh, doesn't it? But that is the option on Zoom, to remove people. I don't really want to have to do that. But if you're struggling to leave, let me know and I can do that.
Wave if you're struggling, because I don't think you can actually put yourself off mute, and you might not be able to use the chat either. So wave if you are struggling to get off. I think I have a ministry in waving. So. I love waving at people.
Must be one of the spiritual gifts somewhere.
Christian conference, and I'm always waving at everybody. It's all good, all good fun.
We have a diocesan Zoom with a prayer focus, and everyone waves at the end, and it's great.
Isn't it just about a wave, isn't it? I love it when people, like random people that you don't know, wave back. That's just like a
wave and a smile.
That's it.
I think Virginia might be struggling. Are you struggling, Virginia? Do you need help?
I'm just nice.
She's my aunt. Hello, Auntie. Are you all right?
I'm fine, thanks.
Good.
I'm still in my bedclothes because I had a funny turn last night, and I thought I should stay in bed, but I haven't. I've come down to put your
rebelling.
Bless you. Thank you, Virginia. I hope it was worth it for you. And that's it. I think that's all of us. Brilliant.
Well done, team.
Well done,
Very
everyone.
well done.
That was super. Thank you so much for all your content. And Catherine, I'm so sorry. I was meant to be in your sessions recording, but I had to just be in the main session because there were that many people coming in and out and not knowing what was going on. I'm really sorry.
No, it's fine. I recorded both of them.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I'd really love to listen to the others.
Yes. Yeah.
Us too.
That would be really helpful.
A couple of things I'm going to do. I'll send you an email with a place that you can upload your video to.
Okay.
I'm not sure how we're going to do that because
don't worry, Catherine. Lucy will hold your hand. I've seen
that
her face.
Do it in
I know that.
I might have to do it in I don't know. I'm not sure. I'll find a way of doing it. I'll ask Maddie, find a way of doing it, but just save it. When you come off this call, it will ask you to save it. Save it and make a note of where it's saved on your computer. It's usually in My Documents and usually it sets up as a special Zoom folder. And then when I ask you to send it to me, then you'll know where it is or upload it somewhere. Then the second thing I'm going to send around is those questions. I've saved the chat and I'll send around the questions we didn't get to. And if anybody would like to give a bit of an answer don't feel any obligation, but by writing, please do. We're not in any rush.
Okay, well, you need to make lunch.
I think that was Mark in the background of Rachel.
Oh, sorry, I have two people in the room with me, so I apologize.
I was like, I know that sound.
Yeah,
I know that voice.
That was good. That was actually Caleb, my 14-year-old. So
you know, very like Mark.
He's a man now. He has a deep voice. Sounds like mine.
Talking about lunch.
There was one point, Rachel, where you were unmuted and started talking about drugs. I mean, presumably in the medicine.
I was like, I'm going to ask for medicine. I turned my camera off. I turned my mute off and I heard her voice chatter and I looked back and I'm like,
oh,
I was suffering a migraine this morning, so I was needing some medicine.
They were a lovely bunch of people and they were very gracious. Yes, so can we set so I will send an email to all the participants in the next kind of 24 hours or so because I want to follow up on some of that, but don't be in any rush to get answers back to me by then. I think maybe if we say a week, something like that, would that be okay? I'm actually on annual leave next week anyway, so I won't be doing anything with it till the week after, the week beginning Monday the 19th. So I'll send you all that, and if you want to respond by then. If you don't want to respond, that's fine, and I will send an email out to all the participants that week as well, and I'll tell them that it's coming with some answers on. That's okay.
If you do want to do a Grandparenting for Faith event, I'd be really happy to explain in detail how you set up. I mean, it really is not rocket science, but how you set up and run and manage those groups, because I mean, I know, Sarah, your research didn't involve Catholics, and we are way ahead with grandparents, because Pope Francis talks about grandparents all the time. He talks about his grandma Rosa and the impact she had, and we are way down the road on, this is a vital ministry. So I'd be really happy to do something around
Catherine,
that.
could you write a post for us to go on the website, because we're about equipping churches as well, so it'd be really handy to have
What do you want me to say in the post? What sort of thing?
Well, like a website article. So we would stick it on the website, say this is really practical, time-tested stuff from Katherine Bergin in the diocese, and these are how she structures her groups. It might be a great start.
The how-tos, that kind of.
This is the how-tos, and what I liked when I talked to you about it was the fact you said pretty much once you've introduced them, they just fly.
They do.
But also kind of the boundaries you put around it in terms of every time you meet, do this, and then but within that you're free. And then you talked about having a gathering and stuff, and that formula seems to work really well and seems really replicable, because I think for churches, and they're looking at this thing, they often don't have the energy to craft something. So the assurance that actually once you get these grandparents together, they'll do it themselves is
and
really
I think
helpful.
The difficulty is often people go, oh, I can't take on anything else.
Yes,
oh, it's always me. What somebody said in the group, it's only grandparents that do this and do that and do that. But actually this group is like a mums and toddlers. All you need to do is put the whole. It runs. And
Catherine, would it be all right to include your email in my follow-up email? Would you like me to do that? And then people can get in touch with you directly. But I think the article sounds like a really good idea as well.
I'll try.
So we'll put that on. and we will try. Well, maybe Becky, can you drop Catherine an email with some ideas and pointers and that kind of thing? That would be super.
I've got a big baptism event.
Bye, Sarah. No worries at all. Lovely. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thanks, Sarah.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you again.
I've got a big baptism event coming, so it'll be.
There's no hurry. There's really no hurry. We just trying to populate the kind of grandparenting bit of the website and fill it out a bit. So in due course, there's no hurry.
I can see a much closer relationship between us and you guys. You know, I've already said to you, Becky, can you come and so we have this annual formation day for grandparents where they come and we have visiting speakers. So I've asked Becky to come and deliver that, and that'll be just messages from your book. But Rachel, I'm already thinking, you know, this lovely book on It Takes a Church to Raise a Parent, that is where we are so lacking, is parents understanding that generation of parents don't have a solid faith. They've got no proper formation. So, you know, fancy coming down to Arundel and Brighton and doing a day, or doing a session? It'd be great.
Is it Isle of Wight? Like,
absolutely.
Where are you, Rachel? Where do you live?
Well, I'm up in Harrogate, but you know,
okay.
Right next to Leeds Bradford Airport is where I am.
But I think in terms of faith, we've all got the same vested interest, and actually working in silos is really not helpful. Things like, you guys haven't come across the CGA, which is the Catholic Grandparents Association. It's an absolute mine of information. She's very domineering, Catherine. But she's a grandmother to 10. She's banged on the Vatican door for years to get a prayer written by the Pope. She knows what she wants, but she's amazing. So there's linking and signposting to each other is really, really important. We're on the same path, for goodness sake, you know.
But you know, we've just become aware of more and more denominations who are saying, yeah, this is a thing. And I think what would be really beneficial is if we could all get together around the table and say, this is, because, you know, we can all learn from each other, and also we don't want to be creating our own little plough furrows, do we?
So how could we establish something which is a sort of, you know, Christian grandparents network?
Churches,
I mean, it's through you, Parents for Faith, I think.
Let's keep thinking, because I think that could be really valuable. And it's also interesting that yesterday Faith in Kids released a podcast on grandparenting, and they interviewed a couple who were actually on the call today. So, and they've been to a grandparenting conference in the States because there was nothing here for them. They went overseas to find something. And you're meeting with them tomorrow, aren't you? So it could be quite interesting.
And I think the value of this is, this feels like the grandparenting thing in the UK is at the beginning, rather than, so it'd be nice to shape it together and sort of all resources together. I mean, obviously, Catherine, you have been doing this for 10 years, but the rest of us are catching up in a sense. But it just, every church is saying the same thing, grandparents, and it's like God said, now is the time.
I'm going to
a network would be absolutely brilliant.
I'm going to end this call now, just because I know everyone's got busy afternoons. But definitely, let's keep talking. Let's keep in touch. And thank you again so much, Catherine, and Rachel, especially because you weren't 100%. And I'm sorry about the mix-up with the timings and all that kind of thing. But thank you.
Sorry, I announced it when I needed drugs. That was, apologize.
That made my day, to be honest.
I'm sure it did. Catherine, I put my email in there if you wanted to get in touch with me. It's just in their chat.
Okay. Right, let me find it. Oh, Lucy, could you possibly send it to me, because you must have Rachel's email?
Yes. Well, I think you're all on the emails I've been sending.
Okay, fine.
So you could hopefully
brilliant.
I'll send you another email after this.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Hold on. I just want to say, Lucy, well led today. You did a great job.
Very well led.
Really well led. You held everything together in the now, right? Frantic WhatsApping. You did a fantastic job. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you, Iona, for all the background stuff, and Maddie, who's gone now. They were super, and Becky and Kate. Yeah, that's great. Team effort.
Becky, congratulations on the launch of your book.
Yeah,
told you so. Okay, now I can go.
I'm launching 20 copies.
Baby.
I do actually love it. I keep reading it.
I love it.
Ooh,
I'm getting 20 copies, Becky, so that each of my grandparent leaders can be given one by me as a thank you.
Did I send you the info about the discounts?
No, you didn't, but I've got discount off this call, haven't I? So
I think we might be able to get you a better one.
Yes, let me speak to Karen.
Now we have to be
I'll email Karen now. Don't order yet, Catherine. We'll find out. And if they say no, then we'll let you know before Sunday, so you can get the 20% discount. But hopefully they say yes with that number.
Thank you. That would be great. Thanks.
See you guys later. Thank you so much.
Catherine, there is you know, there's a bundle code for 10.
Yes.
So you double discount. Very good.
Oh, you can't do double. It's only because it's the church paying, you know, and all the churches need to count their pennies, don't they?
I think the church can get the double discount. I think if you bought 2 packs of 10 and then added our discount code, that should give you another 20% off the 10% that you get already.
Okay, well I'll try and do that, and then if I can't do it, I'll email you, Lucy.
Brilliant, super. Thank you all. Have a lovely afternoon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.